This Week in Startups is brought to you by WordPress.com. Right now, WordPress is offering you 15% off any new planned purchase. To create your small business website today, visit WordPress.com/twist. And by LegalZoom. Get off to a strong start in 2018 at LegalZoom.com. Get special savings at checkout when you enter TWIST in the promo box at checkout. LegalZoom, where life meets legal.
Hey everybody, welcome to a new year here at This Week in Startups. It's 2018 and we continue our mission to find great entrepreneurs who are solving the world's biggest problems through entrepreneurship, technology, and the most important career you can have in the world, which is being a founder. Founders create things in the world that did not exist before. Most of the time they fail, sometimes they succeed, and sometimes they succeed in changing the world. And one of the things we've seen recently, sadly, is many more natural disasters. Some people believe this is connected to global warming. Other people think, oh, maybe it's just a cycle and we happen to be at a peak of a cycle. Putting that controversy aside, I'll introduce our guest today. His name is Ahmad Wani, and he is the co-founder and CEO of One Concern. And One Concern is using artificial intelligence, machine learning, to gauge the potential impact of destructive events. But most interestingly, Ahmad, you survived a flood yourself. We have to tell this story. Welcome to the program. Tell us about the 7 days you spent trapped in a natural disaster.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason. And so between my master's and PhD at Stanford in earthquake engineering, I decided to go back home to get engaged. This was August of 2014. The day I reached, the very next morning at 3 a.m., there were police cars going outside our house saying, go to the top floor of your house because you're going to have a flood. I was a civil engineer, so I was like, these people are stupid. There's no rain, so it can't flood. Within 15 minutes, 3 floors of our house were underwater, and the water started coming up, and it reached to our waist on the 3rd floor, and then it suddenly stopped. Me and my family were stuck on the 3rd floor of our house for 7 days. Our neighbors had a 4-storied house, so their 1 floor was dry, and so they were throwing food at us. And that's how we survived. In fact, on the 5th day, we could see homes collapse, and some of those bodies were recovered across the border in Pakistan. And so
And you were in India or Pakistan?
in India, in the
India.
Indian part of Kashmir, yes.
Got it.
And we were lucky that our home did not collapse. On the 7th day, the water receded, and we walked out to safety. And I started wondering, like, how did these helicopters, which are going over our heads, were trying to make these decisions on who needs to be rescued? They just randomly go wherever they want to go. And what kind of rescue? This person might have special needs. That person might be pregnant or elderly or something. And I initially thought this lack of science behind response or disaster response is restricted to the developing world and to floods. So I was like, if I teach at a university for 100 years, then I'll donate money and, to build resiliency in Kashmir. I came back, and the day I reached Stanford, my professor here was like, hey, did you notice that there was an earthquake in Napa, California?
Yeah.
And this was, I was surprised because we didn't know that there was a fault, actually. We just discovered that fault. So it was interesting. I did some Google searching for that earthquake, and I figured that there were tens of thousands of 911 calls. And it took the responders several days on a first-come, first-served basis to respond to all those people. However, after 2 weeks, they figured that 90% of the calls did not even come from Napa. They came from neighboring areas because Napa didn't have phone network. The lines were jammed or disconnected in the first few minutes. So I started connecting dots, and I was like, wait a second, that means you're not responding to the most affected people. You're just responding to people who can call for help. And Napa is a rehearsal. If you have an actual event with 20 million people calling for help in the big one, and 2,000 people potentially losing their lives, how are you going to save this person on Heartland support in San Francisco who needs help? You won't even know. And so I started connecting dots back to my experience in Kashmir, and I realized this is the same problem. Those people didn't know where to go. These people don't know where to go either. So this problem really exists and stretches across
in the developing
hazards
world and
across geographies.
Yeah.
Exactly.
and in the first world.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Is that a politically
Well,
correct word? Can we use the word first world as politically correct? I know we say developing world for what we used to call the third world. Is there another term for first world?
I would say developed world, but it really just comes down to, I guess, whether
The rich world.
60% of India is below the poverty line.
Right.
So they don't
So
eat
that would
twice.
make it the developing world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, let me ask you a question about being on the roof for 7 days up to your waist in water. Do you think you were going to die at some point?
Every moment seemed to be the last because the water level was never constant. It used to come up, it used to go down. Sometimes it used to go to the roof, sometimes it used to come back to the third floor. So it
Wow.
was constant torture, and every minute seemed to be like the last.
Right. And you weren't the kitchen wasn't on the third floor.
Oh no, of course
The
not.
food wasn't all up there. You
Nothing.
You only had 5 minutes to get up there.
Yes.
15 minutes, you said? 5 minutes?
15 minutes, yeah. So, and we wasted 5 minutes getting the TV to the second floor. Really.
Yeah, we got to save the TV. That's the most expensive thing in the house.
Yeah, because we didn't really think that the water would go to the third floor. And
Yeah.
so it was just,
Yeah. So you thought you might actually die. That
yeah.
could have been it.
It was really torturous. In fact,
What did you think about when you thought you were going to die? Was like something go through your mind? Like,
I mean, at that point, it's an interesting experience because you realize, have you seen that visual of, like, when you zoom out from a house to the city, to the world, you are in that, you visualize that you are powerless in the face of nature.
yeah.
You visualize how tiny and insignificant of a
Yeah.
particle you are as compared to the world and the universe. And
So it's like a feeling of helplessness
yeah,
and like, gosh, as big as our brains are, you could just be
Absolutely.
swept away by this tsunami, this big flood, whatever it is.
Absolutely. In fact, now my wife, we finally did get engaged and got married as well.
Yeah.
And so,
She was on the roof with you?
no, we were not engaged.
Yeah.
So she was in her house.
Right.
And they used to live on the second floor, and the water went to the fifth floor, and the building had 5 floors, luckily. And so they were living in somebody else's house, and their building collapsed hours after they were rescued. So they could have potentially lost their lives. And
we just had an earthquake here last week.
Yep.
You mentioned you were going for your master's and PhD in earthquake science?
yes,
I didn't know that existed.
yeah, not many people do.
Yeah. So I have to ask, what drew you to spending your career on earthquake science?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Kashmir, where I come from, I did my schooling and my undergrad there. Besides being in the center of all the political attention because it's in the middle of nuclear-armed India and Pakistan, it's also really seismically active. In 2005, when I was about to start college in 2007, I was in high school. There was a large earthquake. It killed 70,000 people in my hometown, Kashmir.
Amazing.
And the thing which interested me was the older buildings, which were like 19th century, 18th century buildings. They were standing, and the newly built construction was collapsed on the ground.
Why is that?
Well, because of bad construction practices, and they were not adhering to the code, and bad quality as well of construction. So I was trying to figure out what makes these old structures stand, and can we somehow measure their seismic strength and develop these low-cost methods to use locally available material to actually, ensure quality, but at the same time scale this in that region. So a bunch of my research was focused on either fixing or figuring out these kinds of locally available materials and then testing them. So a part of my research was also focused on building a shake table, which would simulate an earthquake so that I could test out these models because my university couldn't afford to purchase one. So I basically built one in the university.
And we just had a pretty, I guess we'd say mild but noticeable earthquake here in San Francisco over the holiday break. I wasn't here. I was in Los Angeles at the time. How concerned are you about the big one in San Francisco? You live in this area, correct?
Yes, I live in Menlo Park.
Yeah, so you're in the Bay Area yourself. How concerned are you about the big one hitting San Francisco, and how prepared is San Francisco for that eventuality?
So the thing is, we can't really seismically proof in theory, a city or a building. You can make it resistant. And so from the building's perspective, there are a lot of at-risk buildings in California. And now, what San Francisco as a city or as a government can do is basically either do the mitigation, which is create policy or divert funds to upgrade this infrastructure before the big one hits. And it's about time.
When you say it's about time, we've had a long break between big earthquakes.
Yes.
So it's coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
What will it be like this time, the next time?
Well, so you can't really specifically say because the science of the underground is not really well understood. But what you can definitely say is that there is a lot of strain energy which is stored in the faults, and if you have a major portion of that strain energy released, you can potentially have tens of thousands of people injured, thousands of people potentially casualties.
Right.
And I'm quoting government figures here, USGS figures, and millions or 20 million people affected totally.
So this long break and what we've seen around the world would lead us to believe that when the big one happens in San Francisco, thousands of casualties. And when we say casualties, we mean deaths.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's not just the direct impact. There will be a lot of second order, third order effects, whether it's affecting the economy, because there will be loss of critical infrastructure.
Sure.
So power could go down, and water and sewer and other facilities could be down as well.
All right. When we come back from this break, very brief break, I want to talk to you about what One Concern is building. You're going to show us a quick demo. And I want to ask you about the 15 seconds that Mexico City had about to know that the earthquake was coming and the impact of just that 15-second warning before a big one when we get back on This Week in Startups. Let me stop for a minute and tell you how excited we are to have WordPress.com as a partner. My friend Matt Mullenweg created WordPress, and I have been using it for over a decade at This Week in Startups and Calacanis.com. It is an amazing CMS, whether you're looking to create a personal blog, a business site, or both. Your business needs are online, and you know that. You need to have a WordPress.com website. You don't need experience to set up that website. No, WordPress will guide you through the entire process from start to finish. And they take care of all the technical stuff. It's easy to get your site up and running, and the customer support team is there for you, filled with WordPress experts, and they're open 24 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and on the weekends. Yes, that's right, 7 days a week. Plans start at just $4 a month. It's incredibly affordable. And by the way, 28% of all websites run on WordPress. That is a mind-blowing statistic, and it's true. WordPress has been great for us. I've been using it forever. So here's your call to action. Get started today, and you will get 15% off any new plan purchase. Go to wordpress.com/twist, wordpress.com/twist, and get that 15% off your brand new website. It's an amazing, amazing product. I've been using it for decades. Literally, I'm in my second decade of WordPress use. Go to This Week in Startups or Calacanis.com, and you'll see my websites. And you want to go to wordpress.com/twist, wordpress.com/twist, in order to get that 15% discount. Okay, everybody, welcome back to This Week in Startups. My guest today is Ahmad Wani. He is the co-founder and CEO of One Concern. And we're talking about disasters, specifically earthquakes, but floods as well. I noticed when they had that crazy earthquake in Mexico recently, I think it was Mexico City, I watched a video of people running from a square or running out of buildings into a square because there was an alarm system going off. And they built an early warning system there that gave people, I believe, 15 seconds of notice, which isn't enough to get out of all buildings, but it's enough to get a number of people out of the buildings they're in. Do we have that technology here in San Francisco?
So that's called the early warning system. At this point, California is in doing a phased deployment and rollout of that technology. I believe UC Berkeley and Caltech are the two universities working on that. The idea is if you can detect some other waves, which is called the P wave, before the actual damage-causing waves, then you can use that delay to actually alert some places. The thing here is that you need to have an earthquake which is sort of eligible enough that it ruptures far enough and it has enough strength or intensity, and then the locality is further away from the epicenter that they can derive value from being alerted. Now let me explain. So since it is a delay, it's not always 15 seconds. It can vary from 5 seconds all the way to 45 seconds or even minutes.
Wow.
But yeah, but then ultimately, because the further away you are from the epicenter, the more value you can gain in terms of the advance warning. But at the same time, if you are really further away, then you don't derive a lot of value because the waves are not going to really be damaging to you. So there is a certain sweet spot at which, based on the distance, the intensity, and the urbanization of the area, that it would be efficient. So Japan, for example, derives value given its seismicity and given the type of earthquakes they experience, that it is ripe for the geography.
So different tectonic plates and different types of earthquakes will benefit more or less from this technology.
Yes.
California will benefit, obviously, because we're deploying it, or is it going to be just a feel-good measure?
So at this point, it's really early to say, but California is initially, I believe, rolling it out for critical infrastructure measures, just for stopping the eye surgeries going on and opening the fire station doors, so at least they remain open. And then maybe the phase 2 rollout is going to be people with handsets actually getting a notification, but that's going to be in 2022 or 2023.
Because if you were doing LASIK surgery,
yes,
and an earthquake goes off, you're going to blind somebody and rip their eye apart.
Absolutely.
Wow. And if you're a firehouse and the earthquake happens, your doors could be jammed shut and then you can't respond.
Yeah.
Which is probably why firehouses frequently keep their doors open during the day.
Absolutely.
Is that really the reason? When you walk by, you see the fire doors open? Or I wonder if they make that a policy.
I don't know. I was actually talking to a fire chief very recently about if we can collect all the fire data, and he was like, you can just count the number of fire trucks walking. So there must be a specific sort of operational reason, I believe, beyond just the earthquake, maybe.
Okay, a lot of smart people have given you $20 million in your Series A. Congratulations on that, NEA. I think led it. So this is serious backing. What are you building, and how will it help?
So our vision is for global resilience, where we basically come into a city and improve its resilience, either before the disaster, during, or after the disaster, in order to save the maximum lives. And starting with earthquakes, for example, once we go into the city, we will show them, how do they create the best policies in order to save the most lives? How do they upgrade the best infrastructure? How do they budget? How do they spend each $100 in order to save the most lives, whether they upgrade the city hall or they upgrade the bridge, or they just give everybody an incentive to upgrade their homes? Or how do they train and prepare as a community together with their ecosystem partners in order to build that resilience? But that's all beforehand. Once the event happens, we will basically be up and live during the first few minutes, leverage all the understanding which we have gained by continuous preparedness and mitigation measures, as well as understanding of how the earth shook, how the buildings behaved, and machine learning and AI, and then predict in those first few moments what should each agency be doing and how can they save the most lives.
And how do they solve this today? How does a city or a state or even our federal government figure out how to deploy preparedness measures and the dollars associated with them?
So at this point, it's so the complete thing. So let's start with pre-disaster. So preparedness is done using a tabletop exercise. So they have a paper map and they put a pin on, let's say, the city hall, and they assume, let's say the city hall is leaning and 3 other buildings around it have gas leaks. Let's go and rescue them. So they make these mock-up scenarios, and then they basically assign duties to each person attending the training. And that person or that agency could be transportation, health and human services, fire and police, and they will do their roles, or even a Walmart or a Target or a utility company. Now, where we come in that preparedness exercises, we help them create the most realistic training, because we can predict, by understanding the soil, every detail of every building and how they will shake and respond, or based on how they have done in the past, we will basically predict how each school is going to respond, or how each hospital and how each bridge is going to respond. So we will give them a realistic picture, and then take into account their understanding or their human intelligence as to how they would respond as well, and feed all this intelligence during the live moment as well. So in those first few moments, we can then use that intelligence to make the prediction for impact, and then also tell them, given their resources and their capabilities, how should they save the most lives.
Wow. So you actually you have the trolley problem, as some people call it, where what should the trolley do? Should it, this is a trolley problem. Have you heard it before? For the people who don't know, a trolley problem is, say the trolley is out of control, it loses its brakes, it could go down path A or path B. Should it kill the 2 people in path A or the 3 people in path B? But the 3 people in path B are 90 years old and the 2 people in path A are 10 years old. What should it do? Right? These like life and death scenarios.
Well, absolutely. And in fact, at certain
it's pretty heady stuff, yeah?
Emergency managers have to make really crucial decisions, whether they actually allow the fire to spread in a particular direction where 2,000 people could be affected, or where 10 people could be affected, but there is a chemical plant which has a 30% probability of leaking and exploding, which could cause 10,000 people to get at risk. So all these decisions need to be made, and AI can really help in making those decisions.
And you have a demo you can show us?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's fire up the demo.
Can you stop for 1 second? Because that looks like to make sure it's computer.
No problem. Gives me a chance to cough. Okay.
Jason, if you could just repeat the line.
Yep.
Let's take the demo.
All right, well, let's take a look at One Concern's demo.
Okay. So what you're looking at right now is the Seismic Concern platform. So currently we are in the live mode. So any new earthquake which is happening or affecting your jurisdiction is going to come within the first few minutes up here on the top. And all you have to do is, as an emergency manager, is you have to click and basically see the damage. So
we're looking at a map of essentially California and the surrounding states?
Yes, basically. And then you're basically seeing the most updated earthquakes on the left. Your job as an emergency manager in those first few moments is to get an idea of the overall extent. Are 10 people affected, or are 10,000 people affected, right? What level of activation do we want for our essential services, right? And then secondarily, once you get the overall picture, you want to then figure out, okay, where is this damage? And then what can we do to support this and get the city back to its feet in the quickest possible way? So once they click, and I'll be clicking on one of the earthquakes, and so I've clicked on one of the earthquakes which we prepared for this demo, and the idea is.
And now we're zoomed on into a community.
Yes, basically. So you're now zoomed into a particular community. On the right, you're basically seeing the statistics for the different types of people affected. So you're basically seeing number of children in heavier damage state, number of low-income people, number of seniors or elderly in different kinds of damage states. And now as you zoom in, now that gives you the total overall extent, the statistics. Now, as you zoom in, you can visualize this at literally the city block or at the building level or at the critical infrastructure level. Now, you can also basically click and see the different statistics of that community based on the number of buildings affected and the number of people who live there. Because they need to figure out what happened, but second, they need some way to figure out whether those people need help. Now, they can't establish a two-way communication with 20 million people. So what they instead do is they used proxies of demographics or vulnerabilities of those communities as indicators to figure out those,
So if there was a retirement home or a cluster of retirement homes, they could say,
and they
hey, this area's got 20 to 50-year-olds. They're going to be able to fend for themselves and get food.
Absolutely.
But the 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds in these retirement communities, they're not going to be able to fend for themselves and get food.
Absolutely, like what we saw in Florida, for example, the nursing home facility was, people were up to waist height in water. Now, this is an 85% accurate estimate within the first 15 minutes. Now, you can basically use a filter. So, for example, if you have a specific squad which is prepared for with diabetic medicine, and they want to give out that medicine, so we can basically tell you where are all the diabetics, or where are all the senior populations, or so based on the specific, or carrying out urban search and rescue, for example. So, based on the specific response they want to carry out, they can use filters to basically see which are the relevant affected populations. Now, as new data keeps coming in, the algorithm enriches and the entire map keeps refreshing every minute. So, for example, if there is new data coming in from this block, which basically says, hey, this block, a building inspector or a first responder or a fire chief or a fire responder goes to this area and says, hey, I don't think that this building is really damaged. I think that, or moderately damaged. This is completely collapsed. One concern is wrong, that this building is, moderately damaged. And we can be wrong because we are only 85% accurate.
Yeah.
What would happen is once we have confidence over that estimate, it would first of all update this block, but it will literally send a ripple throughout the map and it will update everything.
So if you get eyes on the ground say, hey, listen, this isn't a yellow situation, this is a red situation. This building's completely, down to its foundation. You say, okay, there was some energy here. Let's re-extrapolate the map based on that.
Absolutely, because we also know the kind of building it was. So if it was a 1960 steel building built in a particular type here, and we underpredicted it, we know that there was another 1960 steel building, 3-storied, 2 miles north. We might have underpredicted that one as well. That have been built by the same contractor. So it will send a ripple, and it will refresh that estimate as well. Because what we don't want is that there is a damaged building which is not predicted. So we bias our algorithms to get the higher damage correctly. We want to get to all the damaged buildings.
Was there a mistake people made in building, construction, and design for some period of time that has made a lot of high risk buildings?
So I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but so as earthquakes happen, the structural engineering community recalibrates its understanding of the built and natural environment. So, for example, in 1994, Loma Prieta earthquake, many people thought, oh, there's no damage, chill, it's all relaxed. And then people started looking at their welding, and they saw that there was a crack in their weld. And 40% of the steel buildings had weld cracks in 1994. It turned out to be the most expensive disaster because there were not many collapses, but all the welds had cracks because they were non-ductile until then, because the code did not prescribe it to be ductile. So similarly, there are different things which we learn from every earthquake, and it keeps on updating. Yep.
And where are you at in terms of the deployment of this?
So at this point, we luckily have really received. We've been received by the government agencies with open arms, surprisingly, and and so we deployed in a number of Bay Area cities, including San Francisco and the city of LA.
So they pay a SaaS fee or something to have the software?
Yeah. So this is basically
low six figures.
Yeah. So this
$250,000 a year, $500,000 a year.
Yeah,
something in that range.
Pretty much, yes.
I see a lot of pitches from people who are selling into government. Selling into government is slow, but once you get in, they have a long lifetime value. Correct?
Absolutely. I think it is really slow, but at the same time, I think it's also about what are you providing. I mean, what I've found really helpful, to be honest, is to build trust. The first time when I went to the government agency, to one of the government officials, I was like, well, this is 85% accurate. Look, the accuracy is now growing to 92 to 93%. And she was like, well, no vendor has ever told us that they're not 100% accurate. And I was shocked.
That's because they've never done predictive And now,
Well,
I mean, you're predicting. I mean, the idea of prediction is that there's some number. I mean,
yeah, I mean, they do use models and they do use modelers, but I was pretty surprised. So I think
maybe they were getting told what they wanted to hear.
yeah, pretty much. So I was, so I think being open and being open about things is really helpful, and that has helped us gain trust with these people. They have been like, if you look at the software which the government are using at this point, they have had a lot of bad experiences with people.
Yeah.
So that's why.
All right, when we get back from this quick break, I want to talk to you about not only predicting, but perhaps avoiding some of these major natural disasters. I know that this sounds science fiction-esque, but I understand that some people are actually working on neutering or stopping natural disasters as they start. So we'll talk about that when we get back on This Week in Startups. Hey, everybody, let me take a moment and thank LegalZoom for making great products that help entrepreneurs. What will your story be in 2018? You're probably asking yourself that right now. The holiday rush is over, and LegalZoom can help you make this a memorable year before all the distractions. Make 2018 the year when you get serious about launching and running your business. And rest easier knowing your family's future is set with a great estate plan. LegalZoom is helping people take care of their dreams and responsibilities for over 16 years. They're not a law firm, but they give you the resources to keep you on the right path, including advice from their network of independent attorneys. And it's all at your fingertips. Whether you want to take your biz to the next level or take control of your family's future with an estate plan, LegalZoom plugs right into your life so you can take care of the things that matter most. Yes, here's your call to action. Get off to a strong 2018 at LegalZoom.com today and get special savings when you enter TWIST in the promo box at checkout. LegalZoom, where life meets legal. That call to action one more time. Go to LegalZoom.com today and you'll get a special savings when you enter TWIST into the promo box. Thanks to our friends at LegalZoom for supporting independent media. Okay, let's get back to this very issue. Okay, welcome back to This Week in Startups. My guest is Ahmad Wani, and he is the CEO of One Concern. We saw the demo, pretty impressive stuff. You're getting all that big data stuff from all the open databases that exist in government, well, I'm assuming, or licensing some of that data?
A lot of data is open. A lot of data we collect on our own, and a lot of data is, of course, we buy or license.
Yeah, so there's lots of, when we talked about the big data revolution 10 years ago or so, now we're starting to see it manifest itself where when you started this company a couple of years ago, maybe it wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago because the data sets weren't there. Is that true?
And the computational power was also
Not there.
Not there, yeah.
So this has really been made possible, One Concern's ability to do this, by all the work done before on big data and organizing this information, plus just raw computational power, probably using GPUs as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if the GPU revolution didn't happen, which was driven largely by mobile phones and games, and then pushed to this level by cryptocurrency and self-driving, when you think about it, if it wasn't for video gamers, we probably wouldn't have the horsepower to do what you do.
Absolutely.
It's one of the things people forget about compounding factors in technology. Sometimes like weird things like battery power is being driven by smartphones.
Absolutely.
And now it's finding its way into cars.
Yeah, I mean,
battery packs.
Sometimes it goes, a thing which you do has several positive implications. Sometimes it has negative implications as well.
Yeah, well, we saw that, right? Apple now is studying how to get our kids to stop using their phones.
Yeah. Whether it's addiction,
I'm glad they thought about that in year 11.
Psychosocial or even jobs. Whether
What jobs?
AI is costing jobs, or whatever is whether it's reorging them or whatnot. But I think one of the things, I don't know whether this is in context, but one of the things which we really focus on is benevolence in whatever we do. In fact, we call ourselves benevolent intelligence, because the whole focus of the company was to basically improve human happiness and save lives and livelihoods.
That's quite a nice mission, to be kind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a good starting point. I mean, you're going to attract a certain type of engineer, a certain type of tech person who really cares about saving lives, and it's heady stuff. Now, what about stopping natural occurrences before they occur? We've seen people build seawalls and try to address it that way. That seems like a brute force one. Are there going to be techniques in the future? Are people working on techniques in the same way one concern wouldn't have been possible without GPUs and the big data set? If we extrapolate out some unknown unknowns having some big upticks, is there going to be a way to actually get in there on the fault, address the fault itself, and remediate and or just mediate the intensity of an actual earthquake? Are people working on that? Is it possible in 50 or 100 years we'd be able to go to the San Andreas Fault and fix it or mitigate it in some way?
Well,
Or do I sound like a crazy person?
No, I am, to be honest, not really aware of a lot of institutional research going on in this.
Yeah.
However, I'm aware of a few people who are kind of trying to shoot lasers at the hurricane, or kind of and also to figure out ways to do a controlled release of the strain energy when it's in an earthquake. Yeah.
So that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Controlled release. How would that work? We tell everybody we're going to have a 1.0 every Sunday. Be prepared.
I wish, because see, the problem though is that it's a log scale. So 5 magnitude is a 10 times weaker approximately than a 6, which is 100 times 5 is 100 times weaker than a 7.
Yeah.
So if your strain energy really is stored for a 7 or an 8 magnitude, you have to do a lot of earthquakes to actually kind of release something. And the problem is, it's the depths are really intriguing. You don't really dig at those depths. So I really, to be honest, do not see that happening soon unless we
earthquakes.
do some breakthroughs.
Yeah.
In this field. However, I don't want to scare people here.
Yeah.
But the thing is, people have been working on, hey, can we actually trigger an earthquake?
Right.
So, and
Can we?
Yes. And that has been proven, not completely, but through research, that you can induce an earthquake. Just like, Oklahoma has a lot of earthquakes, maybe 1,000 times more than they had in the past decade. Now they've had
Because
in
of
the past
fracking?
1 year. Yes. So
So people fracking the earth results in the earth responding with earthquakes.
yes, and now
Makes logical sense if you're going to blast the earth with massive force to get out some chemicals that it might respond.
yes, absolutely. So
And also when a nuclear bomb goes off, sometimes we feel.
right, there was a 6 magnitude when North Korea tested.
Now, was that an earthquake that was triggered by the bomb, or the bomb shook the earth that it looked like an earthquake?
Oh no, it was an earthquake.
It was an
triggered.
earthquake triggered, yeah.
Yeah.
So nuclear bombs trigger earthquakes, or can.
Oh yes, definitely.
So does that mean like terrorist organization could figure out how to blow up the San Andreas Fault in some crazy attack?
I do not know.
Yeah.
But
I know this is turning into a Black Mirror episode already.
Yeah, but it is possible.
It is possible. There's something to be. And the hurricanes, that seems like something that a hurricane seems more plausible that we could mitigate because it's above ground. It's not
you can touch and
miles
feel
underground.
It. Yeah.
Is that going to be possible, you think?
To be honest, we're kind of trying to. I'm trying to talk to a lot of researchers in that. I'm personally intrigued by that.
Yeah.
Right now, we're not into like doing physical things with we're purely software, but I'm trying to learn more about it. At this point, none of the institutions I know of are actually on universities.
They're also
are
very
trying to-
predictable, right? Tornadoes and these hurricanes, they're more predictable than earthquakes. Is that correct, generally speaking?
Well, so what we're you can see them coming.
Right.
Now, as you saw in Hurricane Harvey, for example, in Texas, 7 days before, you knew with a good amount of certainty that the hurricane is going to come and hit
Hard.
Yes.
And
is
people still didn't
Houston.
leave.
Well, the problem was
What is wrong with people?
well, because the problem is in the communication. Because unless you, so if you're told that the hurricane is going to come, you'll be like, okay, well, I'm going to be safe. So because if you're told that the clouds are coming or the rain is falling, you don't know what the actual impact to you personally is going to be.
Yeah.
But if somebody is going to tell you that you're going to have 3 inches of water tomorrow outside your house at 3 p.m., fix it, do whatever you want. So that's when things get personal and actionable. And so that's what the flood concern product actually does.
Yeah.
Where ahead of time you would actually be able to predict whose house literally is going to have how many inches of water 7 days ahead of time or 7 minutes ahead of time. And then you can do hundreds of what if scenarios, literally drag and drop resources and be like, hey, if I move this flood wrapping system and these sandbags here, who will now be affected? Okay, how can I save the maximum lives?
It's now starting to hit the public's consciousness. I remember after the flooding, I forgot which hurricane hit New York very hard, but people are actually looking at Battery Park City and Breezy Point and certain communities around New York differently in terms of how underwater they'll be and the flooding impact. It's affected real estate costs and concerns as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Specifically, currently the FEMA flood maps didn't even take global climate model inputs into account, so they're not really accounting for that. And there's 500-year events have happened in the last 3 years in Texas, and there are 500.
Hold on a second, I got to make sure I get that right. 3 typically 500-year events. In other words, events that normally occur 500 years apart. 3 occurred
statistically, yes,
in a year.
In 3 years.
In 3 years. So
yes.
one a year instead of one every 500 years.
Yes.
And that happened 3 years in a row. It's sort
Yes.
of like getting pocket aces and flopping quads, in poker 3 hands in a row.
Yes.
It just doesn't happen that often, which leads you to believe something has changed on the planet.
Absolutely.
So you're not a climate denier. You believe that climate change is happening and it's having massive impact on the weather system.
Absolutely.
Anybody who doesn't believe this, what do you think of them? Do you think that they're insincere, mentally ill, or willfully, got nefarious intent?
I think there are different buckets.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking you, because you know the science better than most. What do you think when you meet somebody who's a climate denier? Have you ever met one?
Yeah, several.
Yeah.
So I think many people say that they don't believe because of certain restrictions or, and internally they do want to account for it. Because, see, 5 years down the line, climate was like, you want to be cool, so you adopt the sustainability route, right? And you had to choose between economy and sustainability. And it seemed like all these 2 billion people are going to come in Asia and Africa, and so somehow we need to slow down our economy to actually let those economies grow. And so there was a balance which people wanted to maintain between economy and sustainability. Right now, what has started to happen is so it has become a matter of public safety, because hurricanes are starting to hit. And so it's not like, oh, the sea level will rise 3 feet over the next 150 years or something like that.
It's happening now.
It's happening now.
And the impact economically is severe.
Absolutely. So if the hurricane, which was Category 5 through most of Texas, and caused, let's throw a number, 200 billion in losses or 100 billion in losses, was Category 4 or 3 because it moved through colder waters or slightly less warm waters, it could have caused 2 billion in losses.
Right.
And so, and 60 people who lost their lives. So essentially now it is the path. It's not like there is a balance between economy and sustainability, because there is research ongoing which now is associating a human fingerprint to these extreme events. And once you can actually tie a human fingerprint, whether it's any urbanization or globalization happening in any city, whether it's a chemical plant or land use patterns or building and transportation, you can basically then go to those people and literally ask them whether they whether they want to save lives or not.
Yeah.
And this is how they're going to be directly affected. So the conversation has changed,
It has
or
changed,
at least
yeah.
it's in the process of changing as more data.
It makes
comes
sense because in one case you have an economic interest where you're saying, hey, we don't want to subsidize, what's going on in China or India where people are burning more fossil fuels. But now it's sort of hitting our shores. And so people who are decision making say, you know what? Maybe if we all work together, we all won't have the economic hit.
And the conversation is changing from climate to resilience, because ultimately everybody wants to save lives.
Right.
Whether you are in this bucket or that bucket or whatever, you do care about public safety ultimately. And
So you started with earthquakes at one concern. You're now working on floods. And those are the two major disasters categories.
yes. So
Because flood includes tornadoes and hurricanes.
no, so hurricanes we'll be working separately on.
Oh, okay.
So hurricanes and tornadoes are separate. And then actually we're also working on fires or wildfires. And then also
Which are impacting California massively of late.
absolutely.
What do you attribute that to? Is it just the increased heat?
Yeah.
Or insane arsonists? Or what do you think is causing this massive rash?
Well, a part of it is the cycle, the cycle which California or certain parts of the Western Hemisphere are exposed to, the climate cycle. But at the same time, urbanization and globalization are causing these extremes, whether it's California or whether it's South America or whether it's Caribbean or anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So now, did you finish your PhD or not? You quit to do the
No,
startup?
I.
Oh my
no,
God, your
I'm-
mom is crying right now.
Absolutely, I'm such a.
How could you do that to your mom? You have 2 years left on the PhD.
They're both doctors, actually.
Oh my God, it makes it twice as bad.
Yes. Yeah, I'm
It's
a
actually 10x as
disappointment.
bad.
I'm a
You went from a
disappointment in the
5.0
family.
to 6.0, just like that. How close were you to the PhD?
No, I was about to start it.
Oh,
Yes.
horrible. Wow,
Yes,
you broke
I
their hearts.
didn't really
This
pursue
company
it,
better be a huge success. Your mom is not going to take it. Mom, he did the right thing. Trust me. He's too smart to finish that doctorate. He's got to go save lives. There's something much more important for Ahmed to do.
Well, believe me,
than do the PhD.
I pitch it this way. I think this is a PhD with resources. I make a
That's a
hypothesis.
nice way to look to it. It's PhD and you get paid to do it.
Absolutely. And with resources, and you make a hypothesis, whether it's sales or whether it's BD or whether it's AI or whether it's product. And then you validate the hypotheses and then, you scale that.
It's a fascinating actually thing to think about as a economic equation. If you really are a gifted student, which clearly you are, to keep going, there's such a cost to it when you have this opportunity to take venture capital down and actually pursue it. You have $20 million more in resources than you would have if you went for the PhD.
Absolutely.
Makes it a pretty easy decision. Was there a moment when you decided to do this company? Was it?
Yes. I think the initial trigger was my professors. So Andrew Ng, who was the computer science professor and the AI professor at Stanford, and Greg Dearline, the earthquake engineering professor, they kind of were propelling me to think about this. And but the thing which really struck was the first time when we actually spoke to San Francisco Emergency Operations Center. Because when we spoke to them, they were like, oh my God, we have been waiting for this from the past 25 years.
So you did a little user interviews.
Yeah, a little.
Classic user interviews, and they said, my God, this is the product we've been waiting for. How much? When can we have it?
Yes, and
That's always nice for a founder.
Absolutely. And they were like, we don't even, I was like, so do you need it on a map? Because we have a Python script right now. And they were like, well, if you, color it on a piece of paper after an earthquake, and we'll send somebody on a scooter to Stanford University, and you color different blocks with different, and we are ready to pay even for that. So that told me that the need seems real, and we can affect a lot of people.
You got General David Petraeus involved as an advisor. How'd that come about? Former head of the CIA.
Yes, he's actually really, really strategic, really smart, and very kind. We met at a dinner in DC, and he actually wrote a letter right there that I'm investing this much, and
wow, he committed on the spot.
on the spot. Yeah, several of these things which you see, for example, the Syria crisis. the Middle Eastern crisis. So Syria had the worst drought ever in history from 2006 to 2010. And so there were 1.2 million refugees in large urban centers in 2011. And then they got weapons, and that's when ISIS started.
Right.
So this was a big group of people who didn't really have food to eat. And so if you could have come in earlier and actually predicted the drought ahead of time and actually solved the problem in a benevolent fashion so that these people don't really lose their livelihoods, this could have been avoided. Similarly, right now you're seeing El Salvador, the people are being asked to leave. They came here after the earthquake, which happened in 2001, where I think 240,000 people, they lost their homes. They had nowhere to go, and they were asked to come to the U.S. So we see benevolent solutions being a solution to a lot of these second order and third order effects which are caused.
Yeah, people without homes, without any kind of hope, are very likely to join a cause.
Absolutely.
And that cause has the potential to be a terrorist in nature or violent in nature. It's people without resources or hope can do things out of anger and fear and hurt.
Absolutely. In
And
fact,
the less human suffering there is, the less likely there will be to be these kind of terrorist attacks or retaliations or civil disobedience, whatever.
in fact, because we are not bound by sort of science in our machine learning models, many of these social stressors are features.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, for example,
Unemployment?
like unemployment, like income level, literally, or even
I was wondering about that. That seemed a little controversial to me, like income level. So you put in voter rolls and then respond first to the people who voted for me.
No.
No, not voting rolls, but income level. Because we did see that with Governor Christie, shutting down the bridge for a group that didn't support him for governor, allegedly. I think it's been proven now. But yeah, so how does income level relate? They would have less resources to respond to the earthquake and would be more at risk, would be the thesis?
Let me give you an example. So Boston,
Yeah.
there are two literally blocks, northern and southern Boston. Southern Boston is completely African American. More than 50% of Boston resides there. Northern Boston is everybody else. Northern Boston, the net wealth of a person is $267,000. That for a person in Southern Boston is $8. Southern Boston has flood risk, sea level rise, every hazard in the world for high risk, and Northern Boston doesn't have any of those. So when the flood hits, Southern Boston is going to get affected.
And they have the least resources to respond.
And so they can't recover. So what the Boston Resiliency Plan is worried about or takes into account is literally the civil unrest which could happen as a second order effect. So their strategy, once we basically in our mitigation module help them figure out what's the best use of budgets, should you operate this building or that hospital, they want racial inequity to be a component. Because they want to prevent those second order and third order effects and build holistic resilience, not just structural resilience.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Similarly, and you see that, for example, in the Florida nursing home, the 40 people, who lost, who were in that, the elderly people who were in that nursing home, or even Santa Rosa, most of the people who lost their lives in the fires were senior citizens. So you can direct your efforts in those first few moments to those affected people or vulnerable people. But then how do you devise policy to actually take that into account ahead of time?
And some data kind of helps policy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it'd be nice to make more decisions of how our government responds and plans based on data.
Absolutely.
All right, listen, Ahmed, it's been a wonderful hour. And one concern, we are very thankful for your benevolent approach to deploying this technology and mitigating, sadly, what seems to be becoming a growing trend, which is natural disasters. So everybody should check out oneconcern.com, and I'm assuming you have some job openings now that you landed that 20 million. What hires do you need that you're stuck on the hardest to hire? You need big data people. You need algorithm AI people. What do you need?
Yeah, we are pretty much, to be honest, we're looking for every like everybody who's mission driven, but mostly the AI, data science, as well as engineering people, because it's a very hard engineering problem at the same time. Being up in a natural disaster, literally, and scaling to that level instantly. Mapping those things in multiple dimensions and doing machine learning on these complex ecosystems.
It's a big challenge.
Yep.
All right. If you're up for the big challenge, Ahmed at oneconcern.com. I think it's going to work. If you got that, if you got that big data knowledge and the algorithm knowledge, and you want to save lives, you know what to do.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much, Jason.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. All right. We'll see you next time on This Week in Startups. Bye bye.